The Galactic Council gathered in the great amphitheater of Xylos Prime, a place built from living crystal that hummed softly with ancient energy. Tall spires rose around the chamber, glowing with soft blue light, and the air smelled faintly of ozone and old stone. Delegates from over 200 starfaring species filled the curved benches, their forms as varied as the worlds they came from, some with scales, others with feathers, some floating in anti-gravity pods, others wrapped in shimmering cloaks of light. At the center of it all, seated on a simple bench of polished obsidian, were the human representatives. Captain Daniel Shaw sat straight-backed, his uniform neat but worn at the cuffs from long use. His dark eyes scanned the room, calm but watchful. Beside him, Lena Brooks adjusted her translator earpiece, her fingers steady despite the tension in the air. She was not a soldier like Shaw, but a linguist and cultural historian, chosen for her deep understanding of alien communication and human heritage. They had come to Xylos Prime hoping to explain, to reason, to show that humanity was more than the rumors claimed. For months, whispers had spread through the galactic networks, stories of human colonies pushing too far, of skirmishes with neutral traders, of primitive weapons and aggressive expansion. Most of it was exaggerated or outright false, but truth mattered less than perception in the council chambers. The Viridian ambassador, Cale Vorn, had been especially vocal. Tall and slender, his skin shimmered like oil on water, and his voice carried a sharp edge that cut through even the softest arguments. Now, as silence settled over the amphitheater, Cale Vorn rose. His long limbs unfolded with deliberate grace, and the light caught the silver bands around his wrists, symbols of high office. He did not shout. He did not need to. His words carried weight simply because of who he was. The species known as Homo sapiens, he began, his voice smooth but cold, has demonstrated a consistent pattern of recklessness, emotional volatility, and technological overreach. Their history is soaked in war, their planet scarred by fire. They lack the discipline, the patience, the unity required of a Tier 1 or even Tier 2 civilization. They are clever, yes, but cleverness without wisdom is dangerous. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some delegates nodded. Others shifted uneasily. Shaw leaned forward slightly, his jaw tight, but he did not interrupt. Brooks made a small note on her datapad, her expression unreadable. Cale continued, "We have watched them for decades. We offered guidance. We extended trade. And what did they do? They built weapons disguised as mining drones. They ignored border protocols. They speak of peace while arming their outer colonies. This is not the behavior of equals. It is the behavior of children playing with fire." Then came the motion. I propose that the Galactic Council formally reclassify humanity as a Tier 3 species, non-sentient by galactic standards. They shall be denied full membership, restricted from neutral zones, and placed under observation until they demonstrate the maturity to rejoin civilized discourse. Shaw stood immediately. "With respect," he said, his voice clear and steady, "that classification is not only wrong, it's insulting. Humans have walked on the moon, cured diseases that once wiped out millions, sent probes beyond our solar system, and built cities that feed and shelter billions. We've also made mistakes, terrible ones. But we learn, we change. That's the heart of sentience, isn't it? Not perfection, but the will to grow." Brooks added, "Our art, our music, our stories, they speak of love, loss, hope, and sacrifice. We've sent aid to planets struck by disaster, even when we gained nothing in return. When the Krellian refugee fleet drifted into our system last year, starving and broken, we shared our food, our medicine, our homes. That's not the act of an inferior species." But their words fell on ears already made up. The Council had grown tired of humanity's messy, loud, unpredictable presence. To them, order was sacred. Control was virtue. Humans were chaotic, emotional, unpredictable, and in the eyes of the galaxy, that made them dangerous. The vote was called. One by one, species cast their decision through glowing orbs that floated above their seats. Green for approval, red for rejection. The greens multiplied fast. The reds were few, only a handful of younger species. Those who remembered their own struggles for recognition dared to stand with Earth. When the final count appeared in the air above the chamber, 187 in favor, 23 opposed, 12 abstentions. The silence was heavier than before. The verdict was official. Humanity was declared inferior. Shaw did not flinch. He simply nodded as if he'd expected it all along. Brooks closed her eyes for a moment, then stood and gathered her things without a word. As they walked out of the amphitheater, the other delegates avoided their gaze. No one offered comfort. No one met their eyes. Back aboard their small diplomatic vessel, the Aurora, Shaw stared out the viewport at the swirling nebula beyond Xylos Prime. "They think we're just another primitive race," he said quietly. "Something to be managed, contained, maybe even erased if we become too inconvenient." Brooks sat beside him, her hands folded in her lap. "They don't understand us," she replied. "And maybe that's our fault. We've been so busy proving we belong that we forgot to show them who we really are." Within hours, the decision was broadcast across every known network. News feeds on Earth lit up with panic. Governments scrambled. Stock markets plunged. Parents hugged their children tighter. Soldiers checked their gear. Scientists stared at the stars and wondered if this was the beginning of the end. But something else happened too. Something the Council did not expect. Across Earth, people didn't riot. They didn't turn on each other. Instead, communities came together. Neighbors shared supplies. Engineers volunteered to upgrade defense grids. Teachers held extra classes on history and ethics, reminding students that humanity's strength had never been its weapons, but its will to protect one another. The Council thought they had judged humanity fairly. They thought they had seen the whole picture, but they had only seen the surface. They had not seen the quiet courage in a nurse working a double shift, the farmer sharing his last seeds after a drought, the child giving her lunch to a classmate who forgot theirs. They had not seen the billions of small acts that made humanity more than the sum of its wars, and they certainly did not see what was about to happen next. Because deep beneath Earth's oceans, in vaults older than human civilization, something ancient stirred. It had been waiting, watching. And now, triggered by the injustice of the verdict, it began to wake. But that was a story for another day. For now, the galaxy believed it had put humanity in its place, and in their arrogance they never imagined that the species they had just declared inferior might be the one thing standing between them and a darkness they had long forgotten. On Earth, the news hit like a storm with no warning. People gathered in streets, in homes, in quiet corners of crowded cities, staring at screens that showed the same message over and over: humanity declared inferior by the Galactic Council. Some cried. Some shouted. Most just sat in silence, trying to understand what it meant to be called less than human by beings they had never even seen. But panic did not last long. Within hours, something else took its place: determination. In Houston, Marcus Bell stood in a dimly lit control room beneath a retired NASA complex, his fingers flying over a keyboard older than he was. He wasn't a famous scientist or a high-ranking officer. He was just an engineer who loved fixing things. Now he was reprogramming defense satellites, old ones, forgotten ones, to work together in ways they were never meant to. He didn't do it for glory. He did it because someone had to. And he knew how. Halfway across the world in Nairobi, Tanya Ruiz walked along the edge of a research pier that stretched into the Indian Ocean. The sun was setting, painting the water in gold and red. She held a tablet showing strange readings from deep-sea sensors, pulses of energy coming from trenches no human had ever fully explored. The signals weren't natural. They were rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. She had reported it days ago, but no one had listened. Now, with Earth cut off from the galaxy, those signals felt more important than ever. She sent a secure message to 3 trusted colleagues. Check the old archives. Look for anything about precursor tech under the ocean floor. Back in Geneva, world leaders met in a windowless bunker beneath the United Nations building. The air was thick with tension and stale coffee. Some argued for an immediate appeal to the Council. Others wanted to build more ships, more weapons to show they weren't weak. But Captain Daniel Shaw, who had just returned from Xylos Prime, stood quietly in the corner until the room fell silent. "They don't fear our weapons," he said. "They fear our unpredictability. If we respond with force, we prove their point. But if we show unity, compassion, and restraint even now, that's what will surprise them." Lena Brooks added, "The Council measures intelligence by logic and order. But sentience isn't just about logic. It's about choice, about protecting others even when it hurts you. We need to remind them of that, not with speeches but with actions." And so Earth chose a different path. No fleets were launched. No threats were made. Instead, Food shipments were doubled to drought-stricken regions. Medical teams were sent to remote villages. Schools opened their doors to refugees from conflict zones. Even rival nations shared data on clean energy and water purification. It wasn't perfect. There were still arguments, still fear. But for the first time in decades, humanity acted less like separate countries and more like one people. Unseen by all, something deep within the planet responded. Beneath the Mariana Trench, where pressure crushed steel like paper, a smooth black dome, older than any human civilization, began to glow faintly. It had been dormant for over 50,000 years, waiting for a specific signal. Not a code, not a frequency, but a moment of collective will. The moment when a species chose empathy over fear, unity over division, even in the face of humiliation, that moment had arrived. The dome sent out a single pulse, silent and invisible, that traveled through Earth's crust, oceans, and atmosphere. It reached every human-made satellite, every power grid, every communication node. It didn't take control. It simply awakened dormant systems. Systems built by hands long gone, hidden in plain sight, disguised as natural rock formations, ocean vents, even old radio towers. In Houston, Marcus Bell froze as his screen flickered. The satellites he was reprogramming suddenly synced on their own, forming a network far more advanced than anything humans had designed. Data streamed in, maps of gravitational fields, energy signatures from nearby star systems, even weak signals from alien ships near the edge of the solar system. None of it made sense, but it was real. In Nairobi, Tanya Ruiz's tablet beeped. The deep-sea pulses had changed. Now they formed patterns, mathematical sequences, star charts, even fragments of language. She recognized some symbols from ancient cave paintings in South Africa and Australia. The same symbols had appeared on pottery shards in Peru and carvings in Siberia. Humanity had seen them before but never understood. Meanwhile, in Geneva, Shaw received a private message from an unknown source. It contained only coordinates and a single line. Go to Site Theta, bring Brooks. Trust no one else. They took a small unmarked shuttle to a remote island in the Pacific, officially uninhabited, erased from most maps. There, hidden beneath a volcanic ridge, was a smooth metal door covered in moss. It opened without sound as they approached. Inside, the air was cool and still. Walls pulsed with soft light and the floor felt warm underfoot. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal with a sphere of swirling silver liquid. Brooks reached out, hesitated, then touched it. Images flooded her mind. Not words, but feelings. A race of beings, tall and gentle, watching over young species across the galaxy. They had seeded life not just with DNA, but with potential. They believed true intelligence wasn't measured by how far you could travel, but by how deeply you could care. They had left guardians on a few special worlds, Earth among them, to activate only when that world faced judgment from the stars. This isn't ours, Brooks whispered, tears in her eyes.
It's a test.
And we just passed it. But the system wasn't finished. It needed one more thing, a demonstration. Not of power, but of principle. Something the galaxy could not ignore. Back on Xylos Prime, the Council celebrated quietly. They believed the matter was closed. Humanity would fade into obscurity, confined to their single system, no longer a concern. They did not know that Earth had just woken up something far older than any of them, and they certainly did not expect what would happen next. 3 days after the verdict, a Krellian dreadnought, the same species that had voted against humanity, entered the Sol system on a routine patrol, ordered to ensure humans obeyed the new restrictions. The ship was massive, bristling with weapons crewed by warriors who saw Earth as a backwater full of loud, emotional primitives. As it crossed the orbit of Mars, the ship's systems went dark. Not damaged, not destroyed, just quiet. Engines stopped. Lights dimmed. Weapons powered down. The crew panicked, running diagnostics, shouting orders. But nothing worked. Then gently the ship was turned around. Not by force, but by an unseen field that cradled it like a parent guiding a child. It was escorted back past the asteroid belt, past Jupiter, until it reached the edge of human space. There, all systems returned to normal. The Krellian captain stared at his screens in disbelief. Attached to his comms channel was a small data chip, human-made, simple, unencrypted. He played it. A voice spoke in perfect galactic standard, calm and clear. We do not wish to fight, but we will not be erased, the message ended. No threats, no demands, just a statement of fact. The captain sat in silence for a long time. Then he ordered his ship back to Krellian space and sent a private report to his government, one that did not mention weapons or defiance, but something far more unsettling: restraint. On Earth, no one claimed credit. No government took a victory lap. They simply went back to work, building, healing, watching the stars, because they knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy had judged them, and now, without firing a single shot, humanity had begun to change the judge's mind. Captain Daniel Shaw received the summons while standing on a quiet hill outside Geneva, watching the sunrise paint the clouds in soft gold. The message came not through official channels but on a small data slate left on his doorstep the night before. It bore the seal of the Galactic Council's High Arbiter, Vorak himself. The words were simple: return to Xylos Prime, not as petitioners, as witnesses. Shaw showed it to Lena Brooks over coffee in a small cafe near Lake Geneva. She read it twice, her fingers tracing the edge of the slate. They're scared, she said finally. Not of our weapons, of what we represent. They accepted the invitation. No fanfare, no press. Just two humans boarding a borrowed transport ship, flying back toward the heart of the galaxy that had so recently cast them aside. When they arrived at Xylos Prime, they were not met with guards or scanners. Instead, Vorak himself stood at the docking bay, his tall Xanthari frame wrapped in simple gray robes, his many eyes calm but searching. He did not bow. He did not smile. But he offered his hand, a human gesture he had clearly studied. Thank you for coming, he said in careful, accented standard inside the council archives, a vast, silent library carved into the living rock beneath the amphitheater. Vorak led them to a sealed chamber. The walls were lined with crystalline records, each glowing faintly with stored knowledge. In the center of the room floated a single orb of light, pulsing slowly like a sleeping heart. We have uncovered something, Vorak said. Something old. Older than the council. Older than most of our species. He activated the orb. Images formed in the air. Stars being born, planets forming, life emerging in oceans of alien worlds. Then came beings, tall, luminous, gentle. They traveled not to conquer, but to nurture. They planted seeds of intelligence across the galaxy, not just in DNA, but in culture, in ethics, in the capacity for compassion. They called themselves the Keepers. The Keepers believed true sentience was not measured by technology or expansion, Vorak explained, but by how a species treated those who could not help them in return. The weak, the lost, the different. The orb showed more, a young Earth teeming with life. The Keepers visiting in secret, leaving behind structures, systems, and a single test, a failsafe hidden deep within the planet. It would remain dormant until the day humanity faced judgment from the stars. If they responded with fear or violence, the system would stay silent. But if they chose unity, mercy, and protection of others, even when humiliated, it would awaken. And it did, Brooks whispered, her eyes wide. Vorak nodded. Our records were fragmented. We thought the Keepers were myth. But your actions, returning the Krellian ship, shielding the refugees, repairing the drone, matched the patterns described in the oldest texts. You did not seek revenge. You showed restraint. That is the mark of true sentience. Shaw looked at the images of the Keepers. So we passed a test we didn't know we were taking. Yes, Vorak said. And in doing so, you reminded us of something we lost long ago. We became obsessed with order, with control, with measurable progress. We forgot that the heart of civilization is not in its weapons or its laws, but in its kindness. Brooks stepped closer to the orb. There's more, isn't there? Vorak hesitated, then touched the orb again. New images appeared. Darkness spreading across star systems, civilizations falling silent, planets going cold. A shadow ancient and hungry that fed on division and fear. The Keepers had fought it once, not with force, but by strengthening the light in young species. They believed that only a galaxy united by empathy could resist the darkness. The system you awakened, Vorak said softly, is not just a shield. It is a beacon, and it has begun calling to other hidden sites across the galaxy. Places like yours waiting for their species to prove worthy. Shaw understood now. This wasn't just about Earth status. It was about the future of everything. Back on Earth, Marcus Bell noticed something strange. The satellite network had started sending signals, not outward but inward toward other planets in the solar system. Mars, Europa, Titan, places humans had barely touched. The signals weren't commands. They were invitations. In Nairobi, Tanya Ruiz's deep-sea sensors picked up a new rhythm, stronger, clearer. It wasn't just coming from Earth anymore. It echoed from the moon, from asteroids, even from the rings of Saturn. The network was waking up everywhere. But the most important change was happening in the hearts of people. News of Shaw and Brooks being summoned back to Xylos Prime spread quickly. This time there was no fear, only quiet hope. Communities held vigils not for war but for understanding. Children drew pictures of stars and sent them to space agencies with notes that said, "Tell them we're friendly." On Xylos Prime, Vorak prepared for an emergency session of the council. He knew not everyone would believe him. Kale Vorn still held influence, and pride was hard to swallow. But Vorak had seen enough. He would present the truth, not as accusation, but as revelation. As Shaw and Brooks waited in a quiet chamber overlooking the City of Light, Brooks turned to Shaw. "Do you think they'll listen?" Shaw watched a flock of native sky creatures glide between the spires. "They have to," he said. "Because if they don't, they'll never see what we've already learned. That being human isn't about being perfect. It's about trying every day to be better than you were yesterday." And in that moment, far below the surface of Earth, the ancient dome in the Mariana Trench pulsed once more, not with power but with pride. The test was over. The lesson had been learned. And the galaxy, whether it was ready or not, was about to change forever. The amphitheater of Xylos Prime was silent as the council gathered once more. This time the air felt different, thicker, heavier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Delegates sat not with judgment in their eyes, but with uncertainty. Even Kale Vorn, the Viridian ambassador who had led the charge against humanity, kept his gaze lowered, his silver bands dull in the soft light. High Arbiter Vorak stood at the center of the chamber, his tall frame steady, his voice calm but firm. He did not call for a vote. He did not present arguments. Instead, he simply told a story, the story of the Keepers, of the test hidden within Earth, and of the quiet strength humanity had shown when declared inferior. He spoke of the Krellian ship returned unharmed, the refugee convoy shielded from solar fire, the drone sent back with a lullaby instead of a threat. He spoke not of power but of choice. Then he stepped aside and gestured to the human delegation. Captain Daniel Shaw rose. He wore no medals, no ceremonial robes, just his simple uniform, slightly wrinkled from travel. He did not raise his voice. He did not demand justice. He simply said, "We never wanted to prove we were better than you. We only wanted to prove we belonged. And belonging isn't about having the biggest ships or the smartest machines. It's about standing with others when they fall." Lena Brooks added, "You judged us by your rules. But sentience isn't a checklist. It's a promise to protect, to learn, to care even when no one is watching. We've kept that promise not because we're perfect, but because we try." No one spoke for a long moment. Then slowly the luminary delegate stood. Without a word, she bowed deeply toward the humans. One by one, others followed, not all, but enough. Even some Viridians lowered their heads. Kale Vorn remained seated, but he did not object. Vorak turned to the assembly. The council made a grave error. "We confused control for wisdom, order for virtue. Humanity has shown us that true civilization is not built on silence but on compassion, not on fear but on courage to do what is right even when it costs you." He paused, then spoke the words that would echo across the galaxy. "We revoke the Tier 3 classification. Humanity is not only restored to full standing, we offer them a permanent seat on the Galactic Council." A murmur rose, not of protest, but of awe. Shaw looked at Brooks, then back at Vorak. "We accept," he said. "But on one condition." The chamber stilled again. "That the council adopt a new charter," Brooks continued. "One that measures a species not by its weapons or wealth, but by how it treats the weakest among it. The lost, the voiceless, the different," Vorak smiled, a rare sight among his kind. "It will be done." As the session ended, something extraordinary happened. Delegates who had once avoided the humans now approached them, not with suspicion but with questions. A young Galen engineer asked Marcus Bell, now present as a technical advisor, how Earth satellites achieved such precise energy modulation. A Krellian medic spoke with Tanya Ruiz about ocean-based healing techniques used in Nairobi. For the first time, the galaxy saw humanity not as a threat, but as a mirror, and in that mirror, they saw both their flaws and their hope. Back on Earth, people watched the broadcast in homes, schools, hospitals, and farms. There were no cheers, no parades, just quiet tears and shared glances. A child in Jakarta asked her teacher, "Does this mean we're not alone anymore?" The teacher held her hand and said, "We never were." In the days that followed, the ancient network beneath Earth's surface began to hum more strongly. Signals reached out to other worlds, not to command, but to connect. On Mars, dormant structures stirred. In the ice caves of Europa, lights flickered on for the first time in millennia. The Keeper's legacy was spreading, not through force, but through trust. The Council began rewriting its laws. Trade routes reopened. Human scientists were invited to share knowledge, not just of technology, but of art, music, and medicine. Earth, in turn, welcomed alien scholars to study human history, not the wars, but the moments of grace, the nurse who stayed in a burning hospital, the farmer who shared his last seeds, the stranger who gave their coat to someone cold. Cale Vorn requested a private meeting with Shaw before returning to Viridia. He did not apologize. Pride still held him, but he said, "I believed order was the highest good. You showed me that order without heart is just silence." Shaw simply nodded. That was enough. Months later, a small message was sent from Earth's deep space network, not to one world, but to all. It contained no demands, no declarations. Just these words: "We are not your enemy. We are your reminder." And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy listened. In Houston, Marcus Bell watched the stars from his rooftop, a cup of coffee in hand. In Nairobi, Tanya Ruiz walked the pier at dawn, listening to the ocean's quiet song. In Geneva, Shaw and Brooks stood side by side, looking not at the sky but at the people below. Laughing, working, helping each other. They had been called inferior. They had been cast out. But they had not broken. They had not lashed out. They had simply been human, flawed, kind, stubborn, and brave. And in the end, that was more than enough.